Salvage, a story by user Rantarian. Chapter 14, Night Takes Queen. Checkmate. Iraq, Earth, 3 years prior. "What's cracking, fuckhead?" Jezza shouted as he strolled back into camp and saw his old mate Adrian Saunders standing there. "I thought you were off brass and towelheads." He gave Adrian a friendly punch on the arm and grinned at him. "Or is it about that time?" Adrian grinned back. "It's about that time. Where'd you fuck off to then? Clearing IEDs?" "Eh," Jezza replied grimly. "Fucking arseholes planted a bunch of them outside the city. Killed a bunch of kids last week. Pipe bombs can really fuck a lot of people up." "That's fucked, that is," Adrian said. "How long you got before you get some time back home?" Jezza grunted. "Who can fucking say? It's too bad, mate," Adrian said sympathetically. "I'll tell Sandy you said hi." "Thanks, mate," Jezza said. "When I get back, we'll all have to have a barbie. Get a drink on." "Goon of fortune?" asked Adrian with a grin. "Fuck me," Jezza asked with a laugh. "How bogan do you think I am?" "Depends on the weather, mate," Adrian asserted. "Fuck off," Jezza said, laughing more. "I got no fucking respect. What's all this shit?" Spotting long cuts on Jezza's forearms in various states of healing. "Lose a fight with a cutlery drawer?" "Yeah, right," Jezza said, looking the wounds over. "I was trying out that knife juggling trick you're always showing off with." "Mate, you meant to catch the knives," Adrian said. "Fuck me," Jezza said, slapping his forehead melodramatically. "Here was me thinking I should just hold my hands out and let the fucking thing stab me." "Nah, mate," Adrian replied. "That's where you were going wrong. It's all in the wrist, you see." Jezza broke into more laughter as Adrian broke into a wide grin. "Fuck me, you're an asshole sometimes, Aids. I'll tell you something else that's all in the wrist." "If that's an invitation to a hand job," Adrian replied quickly, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline." "Such a fucking asshole," Jezza repeated deliberately, although he never stopped grinning. Present day, Zoddersill machining room. "So basically it shoots pipe bombs," Adrian said in summary. "Although instead of explosive charges, it all uses your kinetic technology." "That seems extremely dangerous," Cheer said dubiously. "How many projectiles does it expel?" "Every pipe bomb has around 500 ball bearings," Adrian explained. "The launcher is automatic, but due to limitations on our resources, it can only shoot about 50 every minute." "50 per minute?" Zrypov asked, staring at the deadly-looking device. "That could annihilate a small army." "I've already constructed 200 of the pipe bombs," Tricor advised them. "More are on their way, but I think that should dissuade all but the biggest attacks." The 4 soldiers looked at each other, each of them bearing an expression of barely repressed excitement and joy. Tricor and Adrian had spent the last 2 weeks together in the machining room, with Adrian describing what was required and her turning it into reality. The end result was a basic robot that could move around and shoot bombs. "I'm going to suggest that you don't want to be in the area when we let this thing loose," Adrian said. "Hell, I don't want to be in the area when we let this thing loose." "Adrian," Zrypov said, still staring at the machine in a sort of giddy anticipation. "This battle robot will change the face of warfare." "This thing?" Adrian asked, looking at it. "I don't know about that, but we have got some ideas for those big fucking industrial cutters that the hunters left behind. They shoot a controlled burst of focused plasma," Cheer said uncertainly. "That's how they can cut through thick hulls." "And if you widen the focus aperture?" asked Tricor, clearly attempting to suppress her own excitement with unparalleled failure. Zrypov looked at her as though she'd lost her mind. "If you did that, you'd just get an uncontrolled cloud of plasma just bursting out the end." "Yeah, mate," Adrian said. "We're going to make ourselves some big fucking flamethrower tanks." Triafa had not interfered with the soldiers or their activities. She knew that whatever the human was building would be deadly to his standards, and therefore most likely to break all sorts of warfare agreements between civilizations over what they were allowed to do to each other. She allowed it because if it ever came time to turn weapons against humans themselves, it'd be extremely helpful for them to have built the weapons required to do it. With that said, the concept of tanks bathing the flight deck in searing plasma was still unsettling to her. What kind of savage, brutal world was Earth that this sort of thing came naturally to its inhabitants? She had resolved to look into that as soon as she was back in Directorate space. It hadn't ended with the tanks, either. He and the Ruaher female had assembled a robot that crawled around and rapidly fired explosives at the enemy. Following that, in the time between building what the human called flame tanks, they had co-opted the endless sequence supply of hover devices and had turned them into guided explosives. Triafa could only imagine the kind of devastation this would cause against any enemy coming armed with a standard galactic arsenal. Good. While they were doing that, however, she had been sending out the hover cameras she had taken from the endless sequence prior to the rest of the hover equipment being harvested, and exploring the entirety of the Zottersill. Or at least she had been exploring everything that wasn't behind locked doors, and ever since the robot had scanned Adrian, she had discovered many routes that had been sealed no longer were. She just needed to find the command deck. She realized it was probably behind one of those doors still locked, and then she could see about taking her place as the new commander of the Zottersill. Ship Lady Triafa. She liked the sound of that. Kortai Directorate Space. Karr Operations Station. Overseer Drukra held his breath before exhaling a long, controlled breath that carried away some level of his tension with it. The Hunter homeworld, he asked again. He knew he had heard correctly the first time, but the whole thing sounded so completely mad that he felt the need to ask again. He went to the Hunter homeworld. Are you entirely sure of that, Shipmaster Crifty? I entered the coordinates myself, Crifty told him. He said he was going to go there and kill them all. Are all humans that crazy? Jikra paused, thinking about what he had learned of humans since the hunters sent out their message. A considerable amount, but little of it pointed to that level of foolhardy ambition being the average. No, he said sardonically. It seems it was just your lucky day, Shipmaster. And there is still no sign of your ship? None at all, Crifty said unhappily. It seems most likely it was destroyed by the hunters. I can't see how it could ever have had a chance on their homeworld. Nor do I, Jukra said, looking out of his window towards the distant stars. But it begs the question as to why the human thought it was a good idea. Surely it must have seemed suicidal, even to him. He focused his gaze back on Crifty. Now, it seems to me that you may be worthy of a replacement ship. Crifty looked up in surprise. That sort of thing wasn't expected for a shipmaster who had had his vessel stolen out from under him. I am? Yes, Jikra said, leaning back in his seat. A single-man scout ship. I think your ship is still out there somewhere, and if you ever want to command something bigger, you'll need to find it. Adrian Saunders had taken one look at the harness Tricror had designed for him, and had known exactly what it was. The functionality was unmistakable, especially when you took the joystick into account. It's a jetpack, Tricror announced gleefully. Then a little more awkwardly. Sort of, anyway. It actually hovers under standard kinetic technology. No flames anywhere. This is still fucking Atrix, Adrian said, eagerly inspecting it. Feels like Christmas. What's that? She asked. Some sort of material? He started, then laughed. No, it's not a material. It's a yearly religious thing. People give gifts. Oh, she said, pleased. Good Christmas to you, then. He chuckled. Good Christmas to you as well, Trix. Not that I have any idea what time of year it actually is anymore. Tricra sighed. On Rao, my homeworld, it is the time of the great song. Music is very important to my people. It is how we remember the feeling in our history. It's been a while since I've heard any music, Adrian remembered. With everything going on, I'd almost forgotten about it. But music is real important to humans as well. Akadaka, Guns N' Roses, Johnny Farnham, good times. I'm singing all the time, Tricor admonished him. Well, humming. What? Adrian asked. Bullshit, I've never heard you. Ah, Tricor said. In ultrasound. Adrian snorted. Of course in ultrasound. They were interrupted by the arrival of Triafa, who seemed to be on some sort of mission. Adrian, she said, then looked askance at the hoversuit. Hoversuit, he said. What's wrong? Triafa promptly returned her attention to the matter at hand. I have some doors I need you to open. 5 doors had needed opening before they had finally found the command deck, and with the promise of something interesting going on, the entire group had been in attendance. Triafa had explained that since she hadn't been able to locate any maps of the structure of the vessel in the databases she had access to, she had resorted to using the hovercams to create an internal map of the Zottersill's layout. When this process had been completed, she had focused on identifying substantial sections of the map that the hovercams hadn't had access to. reasoning that any command deck must be of a substantial size on such a ship, and therefore should be easily found by such a method. It had left her with a dozen possibilities. The doors that Triafa had claimed were locked did indeed resist attempts to simply open them, at least until Adrian pressed his hand against the flat metal plate that marked the side of each door. After that, the door locks would audibly disengage and were opened as easily as any other. The first had been the Zoddersil's medical bay, a large section separated from the rest of the ship by a clean room. It was large enough to serve a few dozen patients at the same time, and undoubtedly had facilities far beyond those of the small room Triafa had set up for the same purpose. She and Adrian had, however, seen the clean room for what it was, and had understood the implications. "We won't go in there until we are sure it's safe," Triafa had determined. "Your germs have a way of enduring." The second room had clearly been intended for the storage of weapons, although it was unfortunately empty now, and the third was full of racks that were empty of munitions. At the very least, Adrian was pleased to see the suggestion of what he called missiles, a type of explosive delivered by primitive rocketry. The fourth room had been a large set of sleeping quarters, so large that Triafa guessed that this must be the residence of the shiplord. The others guessed as much too, although they knew comparatively little of the vessel's history, thanks to the uncharacteristic design and elegance of the room when compared to the rest of the ship. In no culture did a common ship hand get such a large room, or the allowance to decorate it as they saw fit. That had brought them to the fifth room, and this had been the command deck. It was grand, at least twice the size of any Triafa had ever been on before, and polished metal surfaces gleamed under the lights. There were 11 seats, positioned variously around the two-tiered deck, most of them facing the wall-sized display on the most significant wall, although there currently seemed to be neither power to it nor the consoles that any of the seats faced. One seat was set apart from the others, a seat covered in faded emblems, with interfaces built into the arms. That seat, Triafa did not doubt, had belonged to the shiplord. "This place looks like a chromed-up Star Trek set," Adrian had said once they'd gotten over the shock of actually finding it. "Look, there's even a chair for Kirk to sit in." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Cheer said, although he was clearly finding the place as wondrous as the rest of them. "It's an old TV show," Adrian replied, and then when they all turned to him in confusion, "You know what? Never mind." "We finally found it," Triafa said. "What I originally came to find. What Beckmer wasted his future to try and secure. My treasure and your freedom." She turned to Adrian. "And it couldn't have happened without your help. Do not think me ungrateful." "No worries," Adrian said. "Just so long as you keep your part of the bargain, we'll be all right." "Of course," she said, walking over to the main chair. "But this is now the moment of truth. Adrian, I need you to sit in this chair. The rest of you should wait outside. I cannot promise that this will be entirely safe. Don't worry, this will just take a moment." Adrian waited awkwardly while the Cortai shooed the rest of the soldiers from the room, closing the door behind them. He was a little nervous, wondering just how dangerous a 65-million-year-old process could be, but was at least reassured by the fact that Triafa was still in the room with him. "What's next, then?" he asked. "Do I get to sit in the big chair?" "Not quite," Triafa said, pulling out the needle gun from her small tool kit and pointing it at Adrian. "I'm afraid I don't need you alive for the next part." Adrian paused, his eyes focused on the gun in her hand. "So it's betrayal, then?" he asked, his gaze hardening. "I always had you pegged as a cold one, but I didn't think you'd try and pull a Beckmer here." "It's not personal," Triafa explained. "I actually quite enjoyed the games of chess. I don't dislike you, Adrian Saunders, merely the threat that you pose to me and what I want. Before you were at least useful as a weapon against the hunters, but now you've built me machines to take over that role." "So, I'm guessing it's not painkillers in that thing?" he asked. "What with my huge organs?" "Heh, indeed not," she replied. "This will unfortunately be extremely painful. My condolences that your superior qualities have brought it to this." There were no more delays. Triafa fired. Adrian tried to dodge the first dart, but the space between them was small, and he couldn't get far. It hit him in the side. Whatever the shit in those syringes was, it must be really fucked up for Triafa to be using it so confidently on him, and he'd been humbled enough by his walk through space without needing further reminding that he wasn't invincible. It took a moment before they both realized that the shot had not penetrated his Wolfigator leather vest, and he used the delay to throw himself back behind the command chair, gaining what cover he could and giving himself enough time to consider his next option. He'd been lucky once, and he wasn't dumb enough to believe he'd be lucky twice. He had to assume the next shot would kill him. just like he always had back on Earth, and act accordingly. I should have made some proper armor, he muttered to himself as the next shot went wide. It was clear at least that Triafa wasn't a soldier. She didn't have the aim for it, and despite her technical gifts, she hadn't done anything smart like turning hovercams into toxin delivery platforms, or brought a gas mask and an aerosol poison. "What is it with you people and your fucking pea shooters?" he demanded as he rose from cover, his adrenaline starting to kick in. He put a foot on top of the command chair and launched himself at her, hoping to take her by surprise, or at least to shock her enough that she screwed up the next shot. Triafa fired again, her eyes wide with fear as she expended the last syringe. She held her breath. The aim was good, and if the projectile had moved any faster, it would have hit. Instead, Adrian twisted his body violently to narrowly avoid the syringe, his hand reaching out instinctively to grab it from the air. In normal Earth gravity, he would never have had the time to complete his mid-air spin. With normal reactions, he doubted he would have been able to launch the syringe back at Triafa. But nothing about this was normal, and he felt as surprised as Triafa looked when the needle hit her dead center, piercing her through the sternum and sending her toppling. He wasn't sure if it was the needle, the force, or the toxin that killed her. But by the time he had regained his footing, she was already dead at his feet. He looked at his hand. I guess it really was all in the wrist. The computers finally awoke from their long slumber, initiating the long list of system checks required when a starship was activated after an extended shutdown period. System start, military configuration, Zottersil, checking hull integrity, damage detected in flight deck, ship support system, flight deck, airlocks, checking life support subsystem, OK, checking reactor, 2% power remaining, insufficient power for FTL, checking weapons systems, missile array, 0 munitions, mass driver, 0 munitions, devastator cannon, 0 munitions, checking shield systems, OK, activating, OK, checking navigational systems, OK, error, cannot find position, checking genetic sequence, unrecognized configuration. Known genetic markers detected, sequence has been registered as user 0. Initiating shiplord setup. Request, great name. Received response, Adrian Saunders. Request, given name. Received response, oh fuck. Send greeting, shiplord, given name, great name, announcement. Welcome to the Zottersil, shiplord, oh fuck Adrian Saunders. Request command code. System error, could not connect to homeworld database. Bypassing. Interrupt. Send emergency notification. Power low. All non-vital systems shutting down. Contact Vistrak Command Technical Division for further assistance. Could not parse input. You have got to be fucking kidding me. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for coming and spending this time with me, and I cannot wait to see you guys in the next one. Get ready for some more Salvage by user Rantarian. Alright, I'll see you later guys. Bye.